Thank you firstly for those who were here last week. For those that have come in for their first session, welcome to the live version of the Premier Cricket Conference. We're not able to get everyone in a room together. We've been enough to get a couple of good guests. Give us a few little snippets of expertise. We're lucky enough to on the line with us John Manenti, who's the current head coach of the Aussie Women's Rugby Sevens side, and in a former life was also the head coach of the Eastwood Rugby Club in the Shoot Shield competition. And for those of you unfamiliar with rugby, that's Premier Cricket's equivalent of club rugby in New South Wales. So very lucky to have John on the line. And John's been the head coach of the Aussie Women's Sevens side since 2018. And prior to this, rugby team. And unfortunately, given the circumstances, I think it probably around this time, in a week or two, probably should have been in Tokyo. But unfortunately, that's been pushed back to next year with COVID-19. So we look forward to having John on the line and no doubt being able to provide plenty of expertise to us all this evening. Tonight we've also got Jay Lenton, who's the coach and talent specialist for South East Sydney, who will be facilitating a bit of a Q&A with John. And we'll also have questions for you guys to be able to ask at the end. Similar to last week, we'll be using the website at Slido, and the instructions for how to ask a question were in the email. But if you visit the website www.slido.com and use the code, the registration code, which is 74240, just type that in, then you'll be able to enter your question. Or if there's a question there that you'd like to ask, you can just hit the like button, similar to Facebook or Instagram or something like that. Tonight, John and Jay will be covering topics around obviously John's coaching career thus far, how he connects with players at different levels, building a strong culture in the teams and clubs that he's worked with, and also some of the differences he's found coaching male and female athletes along the way, having coached both at the elite level, both male and female rugby. So before we start, just a reminder again, if everyone can keep their microphones off and videos off, that'd be great. And we hope you enjoy this evening. And remember, if you've got any questions, please, the instructions, the website and the entry number are in the conversation. So I'll pass over to Jay now. Thank you again for your time, John, and hope everyone enjoys the session.
Thanks, Billsy. Looks like some of the bandwidth might have been taken from Dan Smith that lives next door down there for Billsy. So if you didn't hear John's resume, I'm sure we'll touch on it a little bit as we go through. As Nick mentioned, John's obviously is a national coach, so it's phenomenal to have John on tonight and to have him on the line to share some insights and to share his journey of where he's come from and where he is today. So, John, welcome, mate, and thank you very much. And I guess we'll kick it off there, mate. Talk to us about your journey, your coaching pathway so far, and to where you are today.
Thanks, mate. A pleasure to be here, and thanks for listening to me in advance, guys. And hopefully, I can keep you motivated around dinner time to get through. So, look, I suppose my story is not an unusual one. I finished playing. I played, I suppose, 300 odd grade games between West and Sydney University. My first 8 years I played for West, and then I moved over to Sydney University. I actually bought a pub at Camperdown just up the road, and the Sydney boys started drinking there, so it seemed like a good business decision to go and play footy with them, and it ended up being one of the best decisions I ever made, not just for business, but certainly for contacts, friends, and connections, and being part of a great what became a great sporting organisation. Tonight we're going to talk about a few things, and one of them being culture and club culture and creating culture, and I'll talk about that a bit more later on. But funnily enough, it was my time in the pub that really set me up for a job in coaching, and I didn't know it at the time, but it's only hindsight that coaching, as you all know, it's just relationships and dealing with people. And the pub set me up to deal with people from, 18-year-old students who I'm still dealing with today as a coach of a female rugby team, and to, older businessmen, to tradesmen, to girls on hens parties, whatever it be, all walks of life that come in the pub actually set me up really well for coaching and having to deal with situations that came up as part of that business. So it's quite funny that even I suppose, though I was never a wallaby or a superstar player, my strength as a person in a club was to bring people together. And at the time that I went to Sydney University, we were on the verge of relegation to second division. We were really struggling. And one of the best things that happened around that time was a plan went in place around the recruitment side of things, but equally, the pub became a central point for the rugby club, and people who were around through that period speak about the building of the university became a two-pronged attack. One on the professionalism and the scholarships and the whole program they put together, but part of it was very much around the camaraderie and the social and the joy of each other's company, which formed the foundation. So I rolled out of playing. I retired 2 or 3 times, like most front rowers, and sort of kept getting enticed to come back to the game. And then I started coaching at Sydney University. And at the time, I wasn't sure where I would go or what I wanted to do, but I spoke to a guy that I suppose was the head of coaching at Rugby Australia or ARU at the time, and I told him that I was interested in coaching, and he offered me a deal, and he said, if you assistant coach the women's 15s, I'll fast track you with your development, put you in some of the coaching programs which you had to wait for. So I sort of went back and said, mate, I'm not coaching women. I've got no interest in coaching women. I'm not going to do it. And he twisted my arm a bit, and as it worked out, probably one of the greatest things I could have done, because as a young coach, coaching women was a real challenging experience for me on several fronts. The biggest one being there was it was a clear, like a blank canvas. It was a blank canvas. So everything, they wanted answers. They asked questions. They challenged you on everything. There was no assumption that anyone knew how to tackle, how to pass, how to run, how to do anything. You had to coach it, and it was a really good basis for me to start my coaching off. Even though I'd packed too many scrums over the years, like having to go and learn how to teach that was a really great experience. So I sort of got fast tracked a bit through the program, but that was my first experience with women, and that was in 2006. And I did
John, sorry, I'll just butt in there quickly before we go on. Did you feel that your playing experience helped you in that aspect, coming in and kind of, as you say, it was a bit of a different side of it, coaching female rugby union? Was having a player background and having that knowledge something that certainly helped you with that blank canvas?
I think it did, obviously, from a skill set. What I didn't know is I didn't know at the time, I didn't know how to speak to the girls did I speak to them differently because they were females? I'd been a senior player or an older player and a senior player and a leader in my teams for some time. So I just went down the path, and I spoke to a few of the girls, and they just said they wanted to be treated as footballers. They didn't want to be treated as girls. Talk to us like you talk to boys if you're coaching boys, or your teammates if you coach with teammates. That was probably a really good piece of advice for me because I was sort of tiptoeing around what I was saying and how I'd say it. And I was worried that I'd deliver something wrong or offend them or upset them. And I might say, you guys come here. Oh shit, have I said the wrong thing? I'm not calling them girls, or do I call them ladies, or do I call them women? And I got sort of got concerned with all that stuff. And then in the end, they just like we just treat us like footballers. And it was a great piece of advice from a couple of the players. And essentially, I apologised once very early in the piece. If I get it wrong, I get it wrong. But I treated them just like I did young boys that I coached at the time, or guys that I played with at the back end of my career. And fundamentally, I still do now. I mean, I probably obviously worked a bit of an art around it because I've spent a bit of time over the years coaching with women, but certainly still have that same fundamental philosophy that I'm treating these athletes, male, female, indifferent.
So we have a few female premier coaches on the line, and some coaches that are doing some female pathways as well. Through your experience there of getting that bit of advice from the players, would you suggest that the coach goes and has that conversation early, or is that something that happens naturally, like in your case, or how do you think that again, I guess your advice to confront that conversation?
By default, if you know what I mean. Like I said, I'd sort of got thrown in there, and there were some girls, like I said, at the time, I probably would have been 30, 33, 34, something like that. There were some of the girls that I was coaching were probably 30, so they weren't that much younger than me, if you know what I mean, and they'd had a fair bit of experience. So it happened just over a casual conversation. But I would strongly suggest, especially for somebody who's new to the coaching female environment, is talking to some of the senior players. If it's an older group, obviously if it's a younger group of girls, you mightn't necessarily get that, but speak to those people and just see how they actually like to be coached and spoken to, because at the end of the day you can still use it or not use it as you please, but you're best to have some idea of how they want to be taught, how they want to be spoken to, I'll talk a bit down the track about some of the difference fundamentally coaching men and women, but there's certainly a few bits and pieces to learn on the way. But same, not dissimilar going into a new Premier cricket club. I'd imagine, like I said, you still need to find out. You want to have your own impact, but you still want to find out a bit about the place and how they operate and how they want to learn and how they best respond to previous coaching. So male or female, I think there's a bit in that where you can talk to your senior players and get some feedback from them.
So you've gone behind the pub, sitting down, having a couple of beers, got into coaching, blank canvas with an under-15s female side, and then going on to another female side. What's next? What's next in your journey?
Well, then I took the Australian 20s to World Cup. So the 15s, we had a World Cup in 2006. I then went on to the Aussie 20s in 2008. And then I bounced back to coach the Wallaroos to a World Cup in 2010. So for 4 years, I basically coached pathway teams, I suppose you'd call them in Australian rugby, and I suppose cut my teeth, on these campaigns. At the time, like I said, I had a pub. I was obviously ran a pub, which was pretty full on. So I struggled to go with the day-to-day commitment of coaching club football, which was 2 to 3 night commitment plus Saturdays, whereas these teams were campaigns. So you'd go on a World Cup, you'd be gone for 6 weeks. You'd have a bit of a build up for a few weeks. So you might say a 10-week campaign. So it suited me, and my life at the time was certainly more focused on business than coaching. And like I said, it sort of just kept evolving by accident. I then went to Eastwood as an assistant coach in 2010 under a very good coach and somebody that I'd worked with in some of the pathway teams, Brian Melrose. And then mid-season, Brian got a great opportunity to go and coach in Ireland, and the club asked me to take the team over, and I didn't feel I was ready or prepared, and had no ambition really. I thought I sort of saw myself as more of an assistant coach than a head coach, because it's a lot more fun, to be honest, and a lot less pressure. So I sort of thought that was the path to go down. But anyway, it sort of got thrust upon me, next thing you know, I'm sort of coaching a first grade team and sort of trying to find my way. And a lot of that 2010 was a lot of lessons learned. We scraped into the finals, but got knocked out, in the first semi-final. But a lot of lessons learned, and then I sort of had to go away and then start actually, working out how to build a team to go forward. So 2011, we won the premiership. We won 24 out of 25 games. We lost one game on a cold and wet Wednesday night. It was a make-up game, a wet weather game down at Warringah at Rat Park. I'm still filthy about it. It was the only loss in the season, but
it's at Rat Park, mate. Come on, you got to play at Manly Oval. We know that.
It was one of those situations where the players. It was a Wednesday night, 6 o'clock, traffic. It took us 2 hours from most of our crew were either from the hills or, it took us over 2 hours to get there. The lights were just horrendous. But, we lost the game, and it was our first loss. It was round 11. I remember it, round 11, it was our first loss for the year. And like I said, we didn't lose another game. We went through and won the grand final. And as it was a pretty amazing first full year as a coach. And, I went on to coach Eastwood through to 2015, and we won premierships in 14 and 15 as well. And in 12, we were minor premiers, and we lost in straight sets, semi-final. And in 13, we lost the grand final to a very strong university team. So it was a pretty amazing 5 years at the helm, and I was very fortunate to have a great bunch of boys, club around. So, and then I started getting involved in the sevens, and I started as the assistant coach to both Manenti, and went to Rio in 2016 Olympics, where the girls obviously won the gold medal, and the boys didn't have such a great tournament. So even that was a really great learning experience as an assistant to both programs, and seeing, I suppose, the success and a tough time that the other group had. Learned a lot out of that experience, and then in 2018 I took over as head coach of the girls, so which is still going now. So obviously,
mate, it's an absolutely phenomenal journey, and some of the stories that you've just told. Then, like, I know I'm captivated by that, and I'm sure a lot of others are. I want to just go back a little bit, because I think there's some gold nuggets in here that you'd be able to help, especially everyone that's on the line. You went the other way. You went kind of Wallaroo, so a national side back to club rugby. How did you find that as a coach? How was that coach transition?
Well, I mean, it was very different. Like I said, campaigns are very different, I suppose. I don't want to start making comparisons to rugby and cricket, but you might say like a 2020 part of your season versus your regular part of the season, except I was with another team, so I was sort of, maybe like a Sixers versus state team or something like that. I don't know. But, club, there's something special about club Premier footy to me. You've got 4 grades playing together. You've got to build up throughout the day to the 3 o'clock game. You've got blokes that are builders, accountants, students, whatever it be. You've got this great mix of people from different backgrounds, city, country, all over the place, and you're all playing for a common cause. And you rip in, and then come 5 o'clock or 5:30, you sit in the bar and you have a beer and you talk about what a great afternoon it's been. And there's something very special about it, that, which is different to obviously professional football and and Super Rugby, rugby league, whatever. I mean, I know they obviously enjoy a camaraderie and a beer and all those things after the game, but it's just different to club cricket and club footy, where like I said, it's really on the basis of that relationship and mateship that really builds you build your team bonds.
So you talk about that. I think it's a great little segue into what we're going to talk about tonight, and I guess it's creating the club culture. And as you've just mentioned there, the success of Eastwood over that time. Did you instill anything into the club, you feel, that created a club culture? How you just mentioned there, having a beer, and it's a special thing. I completely agree. I've been in sides where that, and this is a personal experience. I've been in clubs that haven't. I've been in clubs that don't. There's just some that do and some that don't. What do you think made Eastwood so successful in that regard?
Like I said, I argue all the time. I don't even know if I like the club culture terminology, because I reckon it's got to be organic. Like, so often, coaches want to come in and you've got to set standards and expectations for the players. But if the players don't own it, if the players don't run it, it's not sustainable for any period of time. It might be good for a little while, but for me, it's got to be a bit of a natural thing. Also, look, I'll add, winning is great for culture. I mean, make no mistakes about it. In 2011, as I said, we had a phenomenal year. We lose one game. I mean, the culture, obviously, tickety-boo. Well, like I said, it's hard to be critical on the team that does that well. So, and essentially on the flip side, you know, if you look at some of the league sides now, like you lose a few games and all of a sudden the culture's rubbish. Like, it's not actually necessarily relevant to the win or the loss ratio, but there's no doubt it goes hand in hand. When you start winning, your culture's unbelievable. When you start losing, it's rubbish. So, but the fact, I suppose, what, you know, and again, what happens when you win? I said, you know, we'd have a couple of beers at the club after the game, and the lads might kick on and, you know, probably have a few too many beers in town or whatever it be. And guess what? We repeat it next week and do the same thing. And it was sort of, you didn't have to do too much. You didn't have to find a magic formula. You know, what I did do was I made a bit of a pact with the players. Eastwood's in a, you know, and obviously you're all over Sydney in different places. Eastwood's in a bit of a funny area geographically for rugby. We don't actually have many people that live in our area anymore as the area and the demographics of that area has changed. So we had people travelling, you know, from the northern beaches, from the North Shore, from the hills, up at Dural, down south. We had people travelling to come to training for 6 o'clock, you know, a couple of nights a week. And some people were taking, I don't know, an hour plus to get to training. We've got boys from the Central Coast that come down still now. So, you know, it was over an hour to get to training. So I made a deal that we'd only train twice a week on the basis that the intensity of training was really high and that they remained what I thought fit enough, you know. And so basically that meant that on the other nights of the week, they had to, wherever they lived, they had to do their gym and their extra fitness. So when we came together, I didn't have to sit there and run them around the field or do conditioning with them because they'd done that, and we could focus on preparing for a footy game, you know. So that was kind of the trade-off I made with them. And we were probably, maybe not in 2011, but certainly by 2015, we were probably the only club in Sydney that was only training twice a week, you know, and people were sort of, you know, quite bemused by that, but it suited our club. You know what I mean? Like it suited our club. We weren't a club of young fellas that were finishing uni at 3 o'clock, and you know, we had workers, we had blokes that were on the tools, you know, that were pretty knackered from a big day's work, and they didn't want to do it 3 nights a week. So that was an agreement I made with them, you know, and so that was, and the buy-in was complete. Like everyone knew that was the deal. And if you weren't fit enough, you got dropped on that basis, and you weren't told, like, you didn't, you know, that was just basically that's your part of the deal, boys, you know. And the other thing, which we're, again, fortunate at Eastwood, we've got a restaurant at the ground, so we just made it a bit of a thing that, you know, in the first few weeks of the season, we had team dinners, but then it just became a thing that every Thursday night we'd all go and eat there, like first grade to fourth grade, you know, everyone would just sit around tables together and eat. And look, you know, at the end of the day, you know, it certainly doesn't need to be a beer involved, you know, on Thursday night because you're preparing for a Saturday. But just that camaraderie of hanging together and telling stories and having a yarn, you know, just started to build relationships, you know, in those early days, and still now it's you know, it's what they do, you know, sort of, you know, 10 years on, it's still what they do. They just get together and after training they go and have a meal together, and it's kind of old school, but it's you know, it's quite simplistic, really. Like I said, you know, there's a million different ways. You know, people can talk about culture and all the fandangled ways. Essentially, for me, it's just buddy building relationships with your teammates, with your coaches, with your strength and conditioners, or whatever your assistant staff are. You know, and just having the ability to talk to each other. And like I said, sometimes it may be around footy, but more often than not, it wasn't. You know, and it was just and then come Saturday, funnily enough, you start wanting to play for each other, and the fourth graders hanging around to watch the first grader, and you know, the first grader started turning up earlier and watching the early grades because all of a sudden he knew the bloke, and there was a bit of desire there to actually look after each other. And then, you know, we started Tuesday nights. We'd announce the teams as a as a meeting, but yeah, we'd recognise achievements from the weekend, and you know. Then we'd started training because everything was going well. We started doing sessions where fourth grade would train against first grade, which was unheard of. You know, obviously, you know, miles apart talent-wise, but all of a sudden, you know, because we started having you know, blokes, there was a bit of banter, there was a bit of fun. You know, the fourth grader might make a line break, and all of a sudden he was the greatest bloody player. You know, and it just built from that sort of stuff. And like I said, it doesn't need to be. To me, it doesn't need to be rocket science or anything amazing. I've been on a hell of a lot of Zooms over this COVID period, where I've heard a lot of coaches from different have some brilliant things. But again, to me, the club rugby is the simplicity of it. We don't need to reinvent the wheel, or we don't need to go 10-pin bowling every Friday night or whatever. It's just hanging out and spending time together, and and again, it probably stemmed a bit back to my pub days. It's just communicating and talking with each other, and that's to me where it comes from.
So a couple of things on that, because I think they're absolutely wonderful tips, and how simple it can be. In saying that, a wonderful world, a wonderful club. Everyone comes together. Everyone does buy into that. I really like the point here, because of who we've got on the line, about people coming from different places, and Eastwood not being essentially a hub where everyone's from. There's a lot of premier cricket clubs, and also a lot in the country that happen like that as well. If you set the buy-in of 2 nights a week, you go away, you're outside sources, you come back fit, whatever it may be. If people weren't living up to that, was it kind of the players that outed them as such, or did it have to come from the coaching staff? Kind of what I'm trying to get at there is, was it player led? Was this buy-in player led, or was it coach led?
It was coach driven. Sorry, it was coach led, player driven, in the sense that if the players felt blokes weren't working on the field, and I was lucky. I don't love leadership groups. I'm not. To me, like, you want to come and have a talk to me, whether you're, the captain, or whether you're, the last player picked in the team. I'll listen to what you got to say, and we'll talk about it, and I'll take it on board. And but I was really lucky in my time. I had 2 really strong. I had a strong captain, and a strong vice captain that had both been there for a long time, in Hugh Perrott and Ben Batcher, and in that they were the 2 probably fittest blokes in the team. So they led and set the standard. So they just, one of them come to me and go, mate, Billy Bloggs ain't doing his work. He's bloody out in the field. He's not, he's not talking because he can't breathe, he can't run, or he's not hitting any breakdowns. And so, collectively they'd come to me if I hadn't picked up on it or I hadn't seen it. But equally, they'd go to these boys and just say, training, guys, we're not training Mondays for a reason. Like, basically, if you're not going to do it, buddy, we'll find someone who will. So, like I said, it was driven by them and enforced by them, and collectively we'd sort of come to that conclusion. So, just on leadership stuff, I really hard with, I reckon, with female teams. They don't. I've found that it's really hard to have leadership group, because they all want equal buy-in. So once you've got 2 or 4 or 6, they all want to have the same value in what they're saying. So like even here now, like I said, I've got 8 girls that went to the Olympics in Rio and won gold medals, and 8 of them want to be in the leadership group. So it's like I can't have there's 7 people on the field. I can't have 8 people in the leadership group. So it's quite different. Whereas with the blokes and even younger teams with 20s and that, generally they want to be told. They want a little bit of input, but they want to be told. Whereas the girls want a much more equal say in what's happening. So quite a different when you're looking at males and females, and obviously you've got both groups there in the room. It's quite different with how many your leadership groups, if you even want to have them. Like I know obviously cricket, you can have strong captains or strong 1 or 2, and they can be enough to put you through.
So I'll touch on that. I really want to talk about the Aussie Sevens girls, and obviously the relationship you have there as head coach a little bit later on towards the end.
Yep.
Staying on Eastwood here, what coaching support staff did you have? I know some premier clubs are very fortunate that there's an abundance of volunteers that get down, they coach here, there's a batting coach, a spin coach, whatever it may be. Other premier coaches mightn't have, premier clubs, mightn't have that access. What support did you have, and how did you rely on those guys?
Look, I had very little support. We have brilliant volunteers at Eastwood who run the behind the scenes and the water and get all the gear out and all that. But from a coaching point of view, I basically I have an assistant coach, and I always wanted an Eastwood person. So I never played a game for Eastwood. Right? I've coached there for 8 years and coaching director and all that stuff beyond that. But I want somebody who's got the history of the club involved with my team. So I always made sure that somewhere in my little group there was somebody who was, an Eastwood heartland sort of, because they can tell them the history and what it means to them, and it now means something to me because I've been there a long time. But when I started, like, I couldn't talk about what the and rugby's a lot more emotive than cricket. So obviously you're relying on getting them up emotionally before the game, and part of my pre-game, or part of my skill is to have them absolutely raring to go at the start of the game. So I can't talk about the Eastwood jersey like it meant something to me because I never wore it. So I always made sure that I had somebody on my staff that was an Eastwood diehard, player or ex-player or someone that could offer something. So that was critical, and I reckon a piece of advice in clubland: if you could keep some history tagged to your team with somebody there, whether it's a water runner or a batting coach or whatever it be, I'd always say try and have somebody that holds the history and the club's success, failure, whatever it be, because they know it. But then around that, really simple. I had an assistant coach, I had a strength and conditioner, and I had a physio, and that was pretty much how I ran for most of my time. I used to occasionally bring in a specialist coach. Maybe Matty Burke was an ex-Eastwood player, so he'd come and I might get him to a kicking coach once a year or whatever it be, or one of the front rowers that were playing for the Wallaby. Well, we were very lucky. We had some Wallaby front rowers and Matt Dunning and blokes like that. So you might get them down to do a session, but essentially I find that too many voices generally caused more issues than not, because they'd come down and they'd say things which, weren't right or wrong, but often would be against, or contradictive to things you're trying to coach and teach. And so then all of a sudden you start saying, well, then they're not right. They're not, and you sort of find you're almost defending yourself a bit. So I kind of back myself, I suppose, largely to get the job done, in many ways, and then bring in expertise to help me rather than necessarily help the players, So like I'd get them to coach me or talk to me and then let me deliver the message, or I'd get them to sit and watch me and then add value to me rather than add value to the team. And that was just my way. And I've probably mellowed a bit, because sevens, I never played sevens. So, I'm a front rower. For those of you who don't know, football sevens obviously is a much faster game and not suited for front rowers. So I never played sevens. So I've obviously, been smart with my employment of my staff here and got some people that are sevens experts around me. So I'm pretty. I've always been fairly shrewd around making sure I've got the best people around me, or people that I think are the best people, both people and can offer technical expertise to the group. So, but I've always worked in small groups, and now I look at a lot of the franchises, and obviously COVID's ruined a shitload of stuff over this last thing. But what it's probably done is it's helped a lot of organisations clear out their staff. Because they can't afford to keep the amount of people on, and a head coach in rugby now is going to actually coach a lot more than they were, rather than just managing 4 or 5 coaches underneath them. And to me, it's the way it should be. Like at the end of the day, I get the world's got professional, but I mean, I just think that if you've got 4 or 5 coaches, which most of the super teams have. There are 4 or 5 coaches sitting there. It's like, who's coaching what? How do we get this to combine work? Who's running the ship? Well, who's running the ship, but is he actually coaching, or is he just managing all those different parts of it? So that's me. That's me, and I probably like I said, if again tying back to club footy, I reckon that's one of the joys of club footy. It's one of the reasons as coaches you can probably get so much more coaching done, in your club, because you can access players and you're the voice that they're looking for and wanting to hear from, rather than having 10 people, 10 people underneath you or 5 people underneath you doing all the coaching,
So there's a couple of things. I want to come back to the Matt Dunning. I think that's a really good thing, having an elite player come back. I'll come back to that in a second. If you're, for instance, we're talking about connecting with players here, and that's part of what we're doing. and everything you've said so far has been fantastic, and I'm sure everyone out there is getting a lot. What have you done if you've had this experience? If someone connects with an assistant coach better than you, do you allow that connection? Do you want it coming back to you? How do you go about that?
No, I do, because I was that assistant coach for a long time, and I found that it's a lot easier for an assistant coach to be friendly with players than a head coach. As a head coach, there is, and I quite like the idea that there should be some fear. Like me now in my role here, like I'm the one that decides whether a player's going to have a contract or not. So it's not just getting dropped out of first grade to second grade. It's whether you're a professional player or not. Like the fall off from, our top females between Institute of Sport money and our contract money earn over $100,000 a year. Now, if I drop them out of our program, they go to zero. There's no fall back to club or something. It's either $100,000 or zero. So, at the end of the day, there's actually some feeling between me and them that I'm the boss and I can fire them any day. Whereas the assistant coach, he can be their friend. He can, and if things aren't going well, and I was that guy. And I know when I was the assistant coach to both programs here, I'd often have to be the one, picking the players up when the coach had given them a bloody good cop, bad cop sort of routine. I was the good cop, Yeah. Now I'm the bad cop, But I think it's great. I think it's great that players have relationships with other staff members, and that it's important that they know that they can go to them. Like if they are not comfortable coming to the head coach, often it's around, like I said, they don't want you to know there's a weakness in their, their mentality or their system, or they've got a problem. Because if you know they've got a problem, maybe you won't pick them on Saturday, or you won't pick them for the next test, or whatever it is. Whereas they can, if they can trust the assistant coach, and the assistant coach can actually work out whether it's actually something that's going to affect their performance, or something that, basically the problem's been vented. He or she have addressed that problem, and the head coach doesn't even need to know, and player and team are better for it. So I encourage, again, you've got to have good people around you that you can trust. You know what I mean? And that's key. Once you've got good people around you, my strength and conditioning coach here is a former Waratah, Tommy Carter. He's done a bit of work in cricket circles, where some of you would know him. And as brilliant as he is with his S&C stuff, one of his great skills is communication. Is chasing up the players and making sure they're okay. And he'll know when I've given them a blast, or I've had a crack at them because they haven't worked hard enough for training, and he'll manage their mental health in many ways off the field, rather than me giving them a blast, then going back and having to chase them to see they're okay. It's a really good little, it's a really good sort of formula we've got in that sense, that we can look after each other and make sure. And then if there is something wrong, he'll come back to me and say, hey, you're probably going to have to go and have a yarn here, because it's sort of at a stage where it's gone. The coaches got to get back involved.
So I think you do it really well. As you said, you pick and choose who you want around you, which is a fantastic thing to have, and the ability to have that. Bit of advice for those out there that probably don't get to have the luxury to pick and choose who they want. They're in a role, and someone else has been put in a role purely because that became vacant, or the board put them there. Have you had an experience where you may have not necessarily got along with another coach?
I haven't probably. No, I haven't. I was offered a position which I didn't take because I didn't like not so much the person, but I didn't like their style of coaching, and so I've turned positions down on the back of not feeling like the staff would work, and that was probably wasn't the smartest move in hindsight, but at the time, I wanted to, and I still believe that I've got to, I probably could have gone further if I took that position quicker, but if I'm being honest to people, like if you're uncomfortable with the people you're going to be working with, you need to make some changes around that if you can. And if someone's locked into a contract, if you're in the professional world and someone's locked into a contract, you've really got to work hard to try and build a relationship with that person so that you can sort of have the, I suppose, the common goal.
Yeah. We're coming off that topic, back to kind of, you mentioned Matt Dunning back there. It's obviously played a lot of rugby union at a high level. Many premier clubs, both female and male, have our Blues have the Sixers, have the Thunder, have second 11 cricket going on, and they're kind of gradually coming back through grade cricket. It's going to be different this year. There's no second 11, so obviously there's going to be more people available that are contracted. How have you found in your experiences with those guys? Do they jump straight back into what's happening in clubland, or have you had to kind of pull them back into clubland a little bit, or what have you seen there?
Depending who they are, mixed. I had a policy that if you played rep footy, that you automatically came back into first grade. That was part of the reward you got out of playing rep footy. Now, the hard thing from that was that certainly, if you look at Super Rugby, like a Matt Gunning might have been gone for the whole season and come back 3 weeks before a semi-final, and play the last couple of games. But again, that's part of club rugby. I've played at Sydney Uni for a long time, and I have a lot of respect for them. And what they managed incredibly well for a long time is, they could get 3 quarters through a season and get half a dozen Waratahs, Rebels, wherever they were playing, Brumbies around the country. And, it frustrated the hell out of teams coaching against them. The 2013 grand final, we were minor premiers by 8 points, I think, and then ended up losing 50-3 in the 52-3 in the grand final to a Sydney University type chock full of rep players. But to them as a club, you have to respect the way they manage that. And all these players that have played in first grade and second grade and third grade all got, concertina down with teams, and it happened, I suppose more regularly with them in recent times with their rep footy. But we had a policy that's where they came back, but was also made very clear that beyond the first week back, it was a form selection. So if they came back and thought that they were coming back for a holiday and didn't, and mightn't play the best game, but attitudinally turn up on Thursday night and have a crack, not walk around like a prima donna and I can't train because and these days they've got GPSs on them, so you get told what they're allowed to do and what they're not allowed to do. And they ran 400 high-speed metres on Tuesday, so they can't run fast on Thursday. It gets dictated to you a little bit, which is a bit frustrating, but they were told that, performance on Saturday and attitude at training, whether you're a Waratah or not, was going to be.
Yeah.
Thankfully, I think there was a couple of times that I got close to having to make those selections. I had 2 Waratah hookers, Hugh Roach and Fitzpatrick, both same position, and it got to a point that I had to make decisions on one or the other. Like you said, they're not comfortable decisions because obviously I went against what New South Wales were doing at the time and picked what they thought as the second string hooker, and it caused a bit of angst at the time. But you can only be true to form, rugby's probably a bit more opinion based because of cricket you can either score 100 or score a duck, so it's a bit hard to sort of argue with that. But in rugby, it's a bit more, what you gave the team and how how you played affected the other players around you, and there's a bit more synergy around a selection than just straight, markers, I suppose.
So how these guys coming back, I think the policy, obviously, as you say, it's a reward. You're playing rep footy or you're playing rep cricket, whatever it might be. What about the guy that's got the first grade? He's worked his ass off. He's gone to Tuesday, Thursday. Guy or girl, that is. Ex-player comes back straight into first grade. He or she has to go down. How do you have that conversation?
Well, normally you sort of knew it was coming, and so you try and at least communicate with them that it wasn't a total shock that somebody was going to come back at the end of it, or if the Waratahs were going to lose their not make the finals, they were going to be available this week, and so you'd at least give them the courtesy and let them know that it was coming, and so it wasn't a total surprise. I mean, if Enriquez is coming back to St George because he's finished with the Sheffield Shield side of the Sixers, I'm assuming at St George somebody knows. It doesn't necessarily know which one it is, but somebody knows. In rugby, it's a bit more defined because your position like if you're a prop, well, you're one of two, you know what I mean? And if you're a hooker, you're one of one. So, so it's a little bit more obvious whereas obviously batting, you can mix the batting order up, or you don't have to open the bowling or whatever it be. But in rugby, it's very defined. Pretty much, you're one of two wingers, or you're the fullback. So if the fullback's coming back, there's a fair chance you're the bloke who's going to go. Now, we might be able to shuffle you somewhere else in the back line, or there might be an injury, or in rugby we can also carry fresh reserves, so you can manage it. You can manage it a bit diplomatically, but like any form of coaching, it's just being honest and transparent with the players, letting them know this decision's coming, mate. You've been playing fantastic all year. You've done a great job, And normally, what I would do is I'd normally try and always bring that player into the game. So again, luxury we have in rugby, you don't have in reserve. So if Matty Gunning's come back, the front row that's played underneath him, he then might get the last 20 minutes of the game. You know what I mean? So I'm still giving him an opportunity to play in that team. And what I always did with these guys was I made sure that they spoke to the person who was going out of the team themselves. And maybe, like I said, with a front rower, we do scrummaging and training, really give him a few minutes of your time and give him some expertise. So though he's been dropped, we feel like he's getting a bit of love, and he's actually getting improvement from being dropped. He's actually getting something out of it. Some one-on-one time with a wallaby or waratah or whatever it be, and again, really, really good. Really good way to sort of handle it, I suppose. Like I said, if you've got a state player coming back into your club side, is like going over chat to the bloke who's gone out of the team and offer some support around his game or knowledge or whatever it be, or like I said, if they don't want to accept it, they don't have to accept it. But I just think, again, it was something that worked really well for us, and again builds that really strong club mentality that if they're not going to be playing in the same team, I want the team to do well, not bloody I want them to go shit because I'm not in the team anymore.
Yeah. So on the flip side, you're now a national coach. Do you see the girls, for instance, that might not necessarily want to go back and play club rugby?
A little bit.
And if so, how do you maintain that?
I see it a lot with Super Rugby too, because effectively New South Wales becomes their club. The Waratahs becomes their club. They're there more than with us. So coming back to us is almost a chore, So that's why I say when they come back, if your attitudinally not spot on, like you're gonna disable the ship sort of thing, because very easy for someone who doesn't want to be there to be obvious to the people around them, and they're like, oh, you're great, so and so's back, you don't want to be here, but and so straight away everyone's mood drops. So and I used to quite often say to some of those guys, if you don't want to play, like just mate, don't play. Like I prefer you not to play, and normally they'd only play, or not only play, if that was their case, they'd normally need us to play to get back in a team. So they might have been dropped, and they're like desperate to come and have a good game to get back in the team. More so than, like I said, at the end of the season, Damien Fitzpatrick, who just retired this year, is a lovely bloke and played for us. We've got a long list of really good hookers, and basically last year he said to me, look, I'm at the back end of my career. If you need me to play, I'll play. He said, mate, you've got two really good hookers there, and he goes, I'm just going to be knocking them out of the thing, and we sort of thought about it, but we actually had, if we brought him back, we probably would have lost one of those two hookers this year, like they wouldn't have come back. So we sort of made the decision that, it was probably the right decision for him not to play, both for him because he just wasn't up for it. He was tired at the end of the super season. He played a lot of minutes, and for us, probably meant we were probably going to lose one of our young players coming through. So, and then so that it worked out, and again, it's just managing people in situations best you can. But the girls are pretty good, but with our girls, it's a bit different because they don't have a lot to go back to. Most of our girls have come from touch footy and athletics and different sports, so it's not like they've come through a cricket style situation where they've been selected from that. So at the moment, without games on, we're sort of looking at ways to find them footy, and there might be some sevens, but they're a long way ahead. Like national players are a long way ahead of the domestic competition, So we're working on that at the moment.
We'll stay with the sevens, and we'll obviously cautious of everyone's time out there because we'll have some questions no doubt at the end. Talk us through your experiences as a national coach of a very successful team too. There's different personalities. There's different egos. You're not just coming from an area in Sydney. You're coming from all of Australia. How do you mentioned it before tonight about building relationships? Is that your way of connecting with everyone that comes into the squad?
It is, look, it's hard. I mean, we're lucky that our sevens basically is an international. We're lucky until COVID is an international sport. We travel a lot, which means we're on planes, we're in airports, we eat together in hotels, and like when we travel, I'll generally pick on long flights. I'll normally pick who I want to sit next to as in one of the players. It'll be like someone who I haven't spoken to for a while, or somebody maybe it might be a senior player I want to bounce some ideas off. And they don't actually know that I'm necessarily doing, or they don't know that I do that. But I just sometimes I'll sit with one of the staff just to bloody or zone out, or but essentially it's just that using that time to on a plane or whatever it be just to have a yarn and sort of hit them up. Like I said, we've got girls from Western Sydney. We've got girls from Moree and Roma country areas. We've got Polynesian girls. So it's a massive mix of people. So getting to understand them, what makes them tick, is a big part of, I suppose, what I do. And then when you further that in, we've got, and this has been my greatest challenge has been I've got a group of girls that won a gold medal. So there's eight of those left out of the 2016 team. And then I've got another group of girls that basically are between 18 and 22. And, you can't take away the brilliant success that team had, but it was very much an us and them. And getting them to combine has been really hard, and then some of the privileges which get extended to the gold medal girls not from me, but from outside world, can we have these girls and we'll pay X amount of money for them to come and talk, and the other girls don't get those opportunities, so, they were all in one team. There was sort of, different standards around, what was accepted or what was happening with one group and the other group. So that's been my biggest fight. A little bit of ego, but from that point of view, the extra 12 months will actually be really good for me, which will give me longer because I'm just starting to get them where I want them to be now, and they're starting to actually, there's been enough time that they're sort of, though we keep getting reminded of Rio's success, there's been enough time there for the girls to gel and start realising that the new kids are going really well, and they're working really hard, to try and show the older girls how they're going, and they want to be part of this, So it's been a challenge, and I'm sure there's coaches out there that have walked into teams after they've won competitions. Coming in after a gold medal was not the smartest coaching decision. Like, it's always smarter to take a team not travelling well and build them up. Tactically. But that was the challenge for me, and I was there. Like I said, I was part of that. Part of that team that won gold, or a small part as an assistant coach, but I was part of that team that won gold. So I really had a great desire to get them to go back to back. And the challenge is no team has won a gold medal back to back on their inaugural gold medal. So hockey won it, won back to back, but not on their first attempt. So we're trying to do something that has never been done historically, and I think I know why. Because, like I said, with that gold they became superstars overnight, and even now I still get regular stuff and coming back into the Olympics. Can they go on talk shows and blogs and all these different things every day of the week? There's something coming through to them. So it's a challenge managing that, but we're sort of getting there slowly.
Do you obviously you're traveling around the world, as you say, and do you collab with the men's team? Is that something that
a little bit? We play about 4 tournaments now. We play together.
Yeah.
So, and we train. We're here at Moore Park, where we train at the same venue. So often we'll have days where we'll do some training together. The girls love training against the boys, especially from the point of view that their speed change of direction so much better than ours. It prepares us against a high level. and they're competitive, and they're peacocks. They want to show off, and they want to sort of show how good they are. And like I said, these girls are all girls that were the top of their sport. Not necessarily rugby, but top of their sport, coming through their age groups. And like I said, they love performing. They love the challenge. So we do train with the boys probably. I'd say about once every 3 to 4 weeks we do like a semi-opposed, obviously not tackle, but just like a two-handed touch games against them, and then occasionally we'll have a bit of a Olympic sort of fun day where we'll mix up teams and play some different things just for a bit of a change up. So, but they're pretty close, and we've got one pair that are engaged, and I think 2 others that go out with girls from boys from the program, which is probably natural enough. We're under the same roof and we train together every day. So, but around the world, when we travel in sevens tournaments, we stay at a different hotel. So we'll have the women's World Series is 12 teams. So even if we're at the same tournament in Paris, we'll be at one hotel in Paris, and men have 16 teams there at another hotel. So thankfully, we're not managing too much hotels, chaos and stuff.
So I guess where I'm going with that, obviously, you're both representing Australia, so, and not comparing Australia to clubland, but the more female premier clubs that come into cricket are going to have a collab with a men's premier club. Do you kind of suggest that they get together? It doesn't have to be training as such, but do you suggest that the club gets together both male and female and creates this, I know we're trying not to say the word culture, but creates this cohort?
Look, I think like I said, we have a mentality that we're the same club, I suppose. Obviously, we're a country, but that mentality around the same club, but we still have our independence. So we don't necessarily rely on each other's. We coexist, I suppose, more so. I think probably as more teams get more numbers and that, there's probably more of an opportunity to do some things together socially. And around the club, I think I think it'd be great. We've got Eastwood's got. We don't have a senior team, but we've got 13s, 15s, and 17-year-olds, and it's great when one of them teams are in the finals. I get some of the boys to go down and watch and support. Nothing major, but just looking out for each other, and then like I said, the girls appreciate that so much that then next game you got bloody the whole under 13s are at our game because we sent 2 boys down. You know what I mean? So, I suppose the nature of female sports getting more and more professional all the time in all codes, in all walks. And I suppose there's going to be a day where they're going to probably have equal players and numbers and all that thing. So, it probably depends club to club, but I think there's certainly an opportunity there to work together and have a bit of time together, and the girls will always probably get more out of it from a learning point of view, but equally the boys can get a lot out of it too, out of just the way the girls, respect each other and look after each other and that sort of stuff.
Mate, unbelievable. Everything that you said tonight, I know I've got a lot out of it, and I'm sure everyone else does there. Do have a couple of questions that have come through, so I will just quickly jump on the Slido and read them out. I do apologise to everyone that did write a question in, but we have gone over time a little bit, which is always a good thing. Look, and to be honest, you've probably answered some of these anyway as we've gone through, but it's not a bad thing to reiterate. So one question here is, with players getting younger and some travelling long distances, what ideas do you suggest to build that camaraderie if they can't necessarily be around everyone all the time?
Yeah, it's not easy. I mean, we're always trying to work on ways around that, and I mean, we're lucky because my group are here at the Sevens we're full time, so we're together. But when I was with the Wallaroos, we had to work in satellite programs, and then we had to have camps to bring them together. But when you had those camps, you really had to work on making sure that it wasn't set New South Wales here and Queensland there. We really worked hard to integrate them as quick as we could.
Yep, excellent. And I'll do one more because I've just got a text off Billsy, and I think Dan Smith really did take his bandwidth, and he's got no Wi-Fi, so I'm wrapping up tonight. So last question, mate. When at Eastwood, did you communicate differently with players in the top grade as opposed to the lower graders? if they're playing for different reasons. So if they're playing just to be there for fun, did you communicate differently someone that was pushing for representative honours?
Yeah, the hardest thing is actually, I mean, when I say it wasn't so much the people that were trying to go to rep footy, that was okay. It was the guy that, had played a lot of first, second grade and probably was still capable of playing second grade, but was becoming a roadblock for the young blokes. And so we had years where we might have had 3 backs were, I'll say 28, weren't going to play first grade again, weren't going to play rep footy again, but were the best 3 second graders. But the problem was the jump for the bloke in third and fourth grade was then too big for first grade. So that's the hard conversation, working out that at some stage, and I'm sure it probably happens in cricket as well, where you've got a second grader who's probably the best second grader in the club, as in the next best, but he's on his way down the ladder, not going back up the ladder, and the third grader's not going to get that experience in second grade while he's there. And they're the hard conversations and the ones that you have to, you don't want to lose that player. You want them to stay in the club, but you've got to get them to understand they've got a really important part of the evolving of the next generation,
Yeah. Mate, absolutely fantastic. Really appreciate your time tonight. And obviously this has been recorded, so anyone that is listening in or watching in now would like it, flick myself an email or even Nick Bills. But from everyone, mate, at Cricket New South Wales, from the coach and talent specialist, from Billsy, who's struggling with Wi-Fi, we can't thank you enough for giving up your time this afternoon, mate, and tonight. All the best with everything that hopefully you're travelling sooner rather than later with the team, and all the best next year over in Tokyo if that does come to fruition. But mate, it's absolutely fantastic insights, and we really appreciate your time tonight. So thank you very much, mate. Thanks for being on.
Pleasure. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, John. And to everyone that's out there still, there will be another one next week. I will send out, or Nick will send out an email in the coming days about what it's going to be and when to jump on. So thanks everyone for listening in, and have a good night.